Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the witnesses for joining us today. You know, Speaker Gingrich, thank you for your testimony. You are a great student of history, in fact, a great teacher of history. And I'd like to recall the words of Chief Justice John Marshall, who famously said it is emphatically the province of the Judicial Department to say what the law is. I've never liked that quote. Because on its face, it implies some sort of judicial supremacy, that judges are somehow supreme oligarchs, that they are like Moses bringing down the tablets from Mount Sinai. But I think Marshall at the time was presiding over what was famously called the weakest and the least dangerous branch of government in Federalist 78 by Alexander Hamilton. And I think Marshall, if he were here today, would say that, yes, the judges are the ultimate interpreters of what the law is, and of course it is the duty of the judges to apply the law in concrete cases before them. But we face a very different situation today. I believe we do have a constitutional crisis, as you say, a judicial coup. We have Chuck Schumer bragging about his 235, quote, progressive judges, his word, not mine, in over 100 cases, issuing injunctions time after time and time, his words, not mine, to block the Article 2 executive powers of a duly elected president of the United States. But I think, and of course we have the ridiculous decision of Judge Bozeman that planes ought to be turned back to aid vicious Venezuelan drug gang members. But an equally absurd TRO was issued by U.S. District Court Judge Brendan Herson in the P-Flag versus Donald Trump case. In that decision, Herson halted President Trump's January 28th executive order protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation, which blocked taxpayer dollars from being used for sex change operations for children. This is an absurd and activist TRO, and the only reason such grisly procedures were ever covered by Medicaid is that President Obama's CMS decided they would be. There is no law passed by Congress that genital mutilation of children should be covered by Medicaid. So it stands to reason, to paraphrase Barack Obama, that what was done by the pen and the phone can be undone by the pen and the phone. But Judge Herson says no, he is above the law and above the Article 2 and the Constitution. So I believe we do indeed have a constitutional crisis. Mr. Speaker Gingrich, I agree with you that the No Rogue Rulings Act is a very good start. And I really encourage the Supreme Court to issue a ruling to make this very clear. Professor Shaw, in December 2024, Biden's Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar criticized the practice of nationwide injunctions. Then in 2022, or previously in 2022, Justice Elena Kagan criticized nationwide injunctions. In October 2023, speaking at NYU Law School, you criticized nationwide injunctions and what you called precision judge shopping, which seems to me is exactly what's being done against the executive actions of President Trump now. And then in February 2023, in an op-ed in the New York Times, you said that the U.S. Supreme Court was at the time, quote, a genuine threat to democracy. But fast forward to March of 2025, and you're here today exhibiting enormous deference to not Supreme Court justices, but district court judges ruling dozens of times against the president's executive powers, and you're saying, well, they're just doing their job. They're getting it right, and President Trump has it wrong. Whereas it was the other way just a couple short years ago. Ms. Shaw, this looks awfully political on your part. Your response?
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to respond. I mean, I think what I was discussing in the quote that you mentioned was the problem, which I think is a very real one, of single judge divisions where plaintiffs can guarantee with 100% certainty that they will draw a particular judge, like Judge Kaczmarek in Amarillo, Texas.
And isn't that what's going on right now?
Not a single one of the 46 rulings that have come down against the Trump administration have been filed in single judge districts. It's entirely different. So I am not standing here saying that there is never abuse of the universal injunction. Reform, I think, is perfectly appropriate, but that's an entirely different problem, and that's not what's being addressed in the legislation. That's
was the TRO in P-Flag versus Donald Trump correctly issued? And if so, where in USC 42 of the Social Security Act as amended with Medicaid, where do you see an entitlement for Medicaid coverage of sex change operations in children?
Sir, I apologize. I'm not sure the reasoning of the opinion. Many of these opinions have come down either on First Amendment or equal protection grounds, the TROs. So I would have to take a look at the reasoning in the opinion. But a temporary pause, which is what these TROs are, where a judge thinks there's a serious constitutional flaw with an order issued by the president, I do think is appropriate.
Temporary pause, just like puberty blockers. I yield back.